We really need better options. Western red cedar sucks. Maybe the answer is going back to our own local resources. Here in the eastern United States, one possible source is white oak, and I'm going to show you how to use it. White oak logs are common. From time to time, you'll hear rumors that there's a shortage of white oak logs, and maybe that's true to a limited extent, but in general, they are out there. I get my timber either directly from the woods, or I buy logs from an Amish sawyer. Both of these have advantages and disadvantages. The biggest difference, of course, is the price. I pay about $1 a board foot from the log yard. From the woods, I usually get my logs for free. However, in the woods, I never know exactly what I'm going to get, and I usually have to work twice as hard to get the same amount of timber. Either way, I look for logs with a few defining characteristics. First of all, I avoid dead or damaged trees. Once a tree shows signs of decay, it's not suitable for shingles. Next, I go from the base of the log up, looking for the very first knot. Everything below that first knot has a good chance of becoming very good shingles. Everything above that knot is going to be hit or miss. Next, I look at the size of the timber. Anything smaller than about 20 inches is going to require a lot of work for too few shingles to be profitable. Not that there's much of a profit margin here anyway. In general, the bigger the log, the less waste you end up with. The final thing I look at is the bark pattern. A heavy twist in the bark like this tells me that the wood itself is likely to be too twisted for shingles. I generally produce 18-inch shingles. For that, I cut the logs into 20-inch blocks. I make the cuts as even as possible to save myself as much work as possible. A little bit of unevenness doesn't matter. You can see evidence of uneven cuts in 19th century photographs. Then I load up the blocks and head home. You know, the old man was bragging about a brand new sledgehammer he got. I wonder if he was silly enough to leave it outside for me. Yes, all the lights are off. He's still not out of bed. Alright, let's go see what we got. There it is. Oh, look, a delightful little bonus. While I definitely do not condone stealing on any level, I consider this a form of early inheritance. Thanks, old man. Before I start splitting these blocks into shingles, I'll get all of my tools together. First, I'll need a sledgehammer and 2 or 3 iron wedges. At least one of the wedges should have a good point. Doesn't necessarily need to be sharp. Just has to have an angle that'll bite into the log. The other 2 are just for expanding a split, don't matter too much. After that, I'll move on to the froe and wooden club. The froe I used was bought on Etsy and I highly recommend it. It's an excellent price, and this one has split over 3,000 shingles with no problem. I've added a link in the description, and if you decide you really want one, I'll earn a small commission from that. It's a very useful tool, good for splitting shingles, clapboards, kindling, even short boards for whatever projects you can imagine. The wooden club that I use is hacked out of a piece of scrap hardwood. After 1,000 shingles or so, I'll throw it in the wood stove and hack out another one. If you really want to try this out, I suggest that you save your money and make your own club. It only takes a few minutes, and when you finally beat it to death, it doesn't really matter. A small axe or a hatchet are essential. My favorite for shingle work is a small broad axe from Eastern Europe. It's not great at hewing timbers, but it does very well with shingles. A link to this axe is also in the description. A draw knife makes the difference between a functional shingle and a scrap piece of wood fit only for kindling. A shaving horse makes dressing the shingles a bit more pleasant and much safer. They're very simple to build, and mine took about an hour to put together. A riving rake can also make a big difference in how many shingles you get out of one block. It's another simple tool that is definitely worth putting together. You know, I really don't cry much. A girl leaves you, so what? You leave a girl, who cares? A dog dies, a person dies, none of it really matters. The only thing that really causes me a great deal of despair is to see a beautiful white oak rendered unfit for anything but firewood. It's a heart-wrenching experience to throw white oak into a wood stove. Working out the bolts is really, for me, the most pleasant part of this job. Each of these blocks holds a deep secret. Will it split into a beautiful flat surface, or will it fight me every step of the way, leaving a mess of twisted splinters? I start by splitting the blocks in half, the most exciting part for me. When this is finished, I will know if I've gotten a good log or something that was a bad investment. Then I split the halves into quarters. I split the quarters into eighths. I split it down until I have pieces that will make from 4 to 8 nice shingles. These are known as bolts. This is where the advantage of working with bigger logs really comes out. Small logs give you a few small bolts that are hard to control in the break. The thickness change from outside to inside is pretty drastic, meaning that I'll have to work twice as hard for half the shingles. The larger log gives you these nice rectangular bolts. When I split these, there will be almost no waste. I can get as many as 100, 125 shingles out of one massive block. That's a lot of shingles. And I didn't have to work terribly hard to get it. Actually splitting the bolts into usable shingles is where you see the most variation. I'll show you a couple. I take a bolt that can make 4 or 8 shingles and put the edge of the froe a bit over ½ an inch from one edge. I drive it down, beginning the split. With the shingle on the far side of the bolt, I pull back on the froe handle. I support the bolt with my foot or knee. Sometimes it comes off with a healthy pop. Sometimes I have to work the froe down, prying it as I go. Then I flip the bolt over and come down the opposite side. This creates a nice taper that means I don't have to shave the shingle nearly as much later. This is tricky though. I lose a lot of potential shingles doing this, especially without a riving break. The break is a big help and I can generally get away with this. Another method is even easier. The bolts are just split in half again and again and again till there's nothing left to split. If I didn't have a froe, I'd use this method using my axe for the splitting. This has 2 disadvantages. First, it leaves a lot of material to shave later to get a nice taper. Also, unless the log is very big, there won't be many shingles to show for all that work. Few things are as frustrating as grabbing an armload of shingles, climbing up a ladder onto the scaffolding. Just when you're ready to start nailing them into place, you find that these shingles are complete garbage. Don't lose your temper. Do not lose your temper. Do not lose your temper. You're on a job. Conduct yourself with some degree of professionalism. Save your murderous rage for where it belongs, at home. The most neglected part of this entire process is dressing the split shingles. And I think I know why. Dressing the shingles is the most time-consuming job imaginable. It's tedious, slow, boring, everything you hate to do. Maybe that's why a lot of people like to claim that gouges and split shingles are a good thing, giving the rain a place to go. I mean, I really can't blame them. People always want to get out of work, convincing themselves and others that shingles don't need to be dressed. These gouges give a place for organic materials to build up and harden over time. A smooth shingle is going to shed water just as good, or even better than a rough shingle. There is a reason that the laws regulating shingles 200 years ago were very specific and required well-shaved shingles. Rough shingles were unacceptable then and should be unacceptable today. I start by taking off the sapwood. On white oak, it's easy to see. I mean, you got this bright white strip running down the side. It's pretty obvious. Then I take my hatchet and trim the sides to make them roughly straight. If the shingle is a bit twisted, this is where I go through and just hack down any high spots. I put the rough shingle into the shaving horse and start shaving. I like to use the draw knife with the bevel down most of the time, but when I need to shave off more material in one swipe, I'll flip it over with the bevel up. The draw knife needs to be really sharp to be effective. I start at the butt end of the shingle and establish the overall thickness at the bottom. Once both sides are shaved smooth, I turn it around and work the back end. My goal is a gentle taper that makes laying the shingles much easier. The smoother the shingle, the longer it'll survive. According to the state of Massachusetts, in the first decades of the 19th century, the ideal shingle was about 4.5 inches wide, ½ an inch thick when they were green, and well shaved. Any shingle under 3 inches was rejected. Now, a quick note about 19th century roofs. They were not always perfect, and there's a very good reason for that. This roof looks fairly new in 1860s Virginia, but if you look closely at the end, you can see some pretty uneven shingles here. It's crazy. I get a lot of satisfaction from seeing a stack of 500 or 1,000 shingles sitting in my yard, but they're not doing any good there. So it's time to go put them on a roof.